Our story begins with a doctor looking through a file in his office. He tells a woman he thought he would see her husband with her today. She says he was busy. The doctor tells her he is sorry, but they ran all the tests, and her chances to save him are very low. The condition he is referring to is not currently known. Once she leaves his office, he says that in these times, maybe it's for the best. Such words upset the woman even more. In the next scene, we see a school teacher reading to her kids. Her name is Horton. A man interrupts her by quickly opening the door to say he wants to talk to her. He is the headmaster, who has been told she hasn't been using the new pamphlet. When he hands it to her, Horton returns to her classroom to read from it. She announces to the class she has to pass on official information. The headmaster watches her, waiting for the woman to start reading. She reads that to fight the ongoing sanitary crisis, official containment centers have been deployed all over the country. The children have to find out where theirs is located. If any one of them is infected, they have to report it immediately to the nearest containment center. The next scene shows us lawmen hard at work, trying to deal with zombies. One of them gets bitten or scratched on his wrist, so he walks away from his fellow officers to look at an assortment of tools on a table. After he takes a saw, he leaves to most likely sever his hand with it to stop the infection from spreading. Following this, a man arrives in a truck to another man, who seems to have been waiting for him. The one who arrived brought several long planks of wood, to possibly have the other man use them to secure his house from the zombies. Switching to a church, we see people listening to the priest talk. As zombies break in, they all gather near the priest, Father Albert. He tells them to let God know that they put their trust in him, and that they are not afraid. Later, we see a man wake up elsewhere. He is the one from the previous scene. He is Dan, getting up to collect his rifle, completely alert. He points it in the darkness in front of him, but nothing comes out of it. He cautiously collects a plate from the floor. Approaching an area where many cans are stacked on top of each other, Dan takes one. It seems like he is ready for the apocalypse. Soon he eats from it with some crackers. Moving along, the man takes meat out from a cooler that he puts on the plate he collected. He brings it to the place we saw him wake up in. Dan is feeding someone dangerous. Who it is, we currently don't know. When he exits his house, he looks through the scope of his rifle. Since it looks clear, he locks his door and moves forward. Walking through the woods, he hears a pig. It doesn't take long for him to fire his rifle at it. He marks the tree near it before continuing to walk. While he collects water with his canister, a few zombies surprise him on the other side of the stream. It's good they can't get to him. Dan returns to his pig and carries it back home on his shoulders. At home, he takes out a small radio to listen to it. The announcer encourages people to join him somewhere. He considers his area to be people's best chance at surviving this apocalypse. In the next scene, a little boy walks over to his older sister Helen. She tells him she found something. She wants to show it to him, but he must eat raw meat first for an odd reason. All he has is one bite of it, and Helen gives her brother Barney the candy she found. Once she lifts his shirt, we see the wound on him. Then another boy meets both of them. He is Kevin, who is Helen's boyfriend. He shows her the batteries he found, and she kisses him as a thank you. Helen asks where Horton is, and he says she was behind him. We see her standing outside, looking at a GPS. When she joins the gang, Helen tells her that Kevin found batteries. They all sit on the floor, watching him load them into a radio. After he does, he tunes the radio to a certain station that is silent. Horton says that despite them not broadcasting, they could still be there. She says the island is still their best chance. They have the coordinates as well as the GPS. Outside, Barney slowly walks toward a few zombies. Interestingly, they aren't coming at him, though it looks like they're getting ready for it. Horton stops the boy from advancing further. Soon the group starts to run, and the zombies chase them. As they run, Horton falls, dropping her GPS. Kevin says there isn't any time to collect it. Thus, they abandon it and hide behind trees. Since they need the GPS, Horton gets the zombies to follow her. With them gone, Kevin collects the GPS. Switching to Dan, he guts the pig he hunted. He packs much of its meat into aluminum foil and places it into his cooler. He goes to his special room to put a plate of the fresh meat to whoever he is keeping there. He talks to the unseen zombie, asking how his or her day was. Not getting an answer, Dan says his day was okay. He went to the stream, where he saw some people, as he calls them. He also listened to the news, which he says is still not giving him anything. A hand grabs the meat he left on the floor in a short time. Later, he wakes up in that room again. He hears knocking and goes downstairs with his rifle. The man finds Kevin in his house, prompting him to aim his rifle at the intruder. Kevin pleads for Dan not to shoot him, so he gets taken downstairs because Dan wants him to fix the window he probably entered the house through. Kevin wants to open the front door, an action the homeowner forbids him to do. But the boy says his girlfriend and her brother are out there. Dan shows how much he cares by yelling they can stay out there, despite what Dan commands. Kevin opens the door without fear of getting shot. He lets Helen inside along with Barney. After he holds them all at gunpoint for a few seconds, Dan goes to add a barricade to the window he wanted Kevin to fix. Returning to the group, he asks how old they are. Kevin reveals he is 15 whilst Barney is 8. Helen says all they need is someplace to stay for the night. Therefore, the generous man brings them to a couch. He inquires if they are traveling on their own. Barney says they were with Horton, and Helen says the woman is their teacher. She tells Dan they will be gone from his house in the morning. Dan lets the group stay. However, he wants them to only reside on the first floor. Alone with his girlfriend, Kevin says they still have enough power in the GPS to get to the island. He wants to find Horton at the next waypoint. Yet Helen doubts the lady is even alive. She thinks they have to find their own way to the island. Soon Dan finds Barney in his cooler room, eating the raw meat. He sees the boy's wound, making Barney tell him it's okay and does not hurt. Meanwhile, his sister is looking for him. She calls out to him upstairs. Seeing her there, Dan yells that he instructed them not to go up there. Her excuse is that she was looking for her brother. The next day, Helen finds Barney with a GPS and frets about its battery being lifeless. Kevin yells at the boy, reminding him the GPS isn't a toy to be played with. Helen defends the youngster by saying he's just 8 years old. Kevin is upset that they will never find the island now. When Dan joins them, Helen tells him they are trying to find the island with their GPS. Asking what the place is, he learns it's supposed to be safe there. He learns the batteries are lifeless and knows where they can charge the device. He says they can leave in 1 hour to get them. Later, Helen wonders why the man is helping them. She asks her boyfriend if he trusts the homeowner, to which he replies they don't have a choice. Once Dan comes to them, he says Barney will stay in the house. Helen objects to it, but Dan says they can lock this place and leave food and water for him. She insists she is not going anywhere without her brother, so Dan agrees for all of them to go. Outside, he tells the group they are going to a school. It has a generator that could be used to recharge the GPS. They walk through the woods to arrive near several abandoned cars. Helen extracts gasoline from one of them to fill the canister. The group eventually makes it to the school, where zombies present themselves. Dan refrains from shooting them because he says the noise will attract more. Thus they run instead, until they come to a door that Dan opens with a key. Kevin is curious to know how he has such a key, and Dan says he used to work there. Soon the gang reaches the basement, where they power the generator with their collected gas. As they sit, they hear a noise that prompts Dan to instruct them to wait, while he checks what it was. Shortly after he leaves, Kevin decides to follow him. He meets Dan and tells him he can't leave them, thinking that's what the man is doing. Dan responds by giving the boy a handgun before telling him to keep the door near them closed. When Dan goes on the other side of it, Kevin returns to his girlfriend. At a different time, we see their GPS reaching full charge. Seeing this, Kevin tells Helen to wake up. She notices Barney is several feet away from them, making zombie sound. She tells Kevin her brother is alright, but her boyfriend wants to knock sense into her by rhetorically asking if that's what Barney is. He wants to shoot the boy with the gun Dan gave him. Helen urges him to put the weapon away. She says Barney is still human. According to her, there is time to get him to the island, where she thinks he might be cured. Then a bang interrupts her, and she says it could be Dan. Kevin directs himself towards the door Dan instructed him not to open. A man behind it says they have taken care of the zombies. Listening to him, Kevin opens the door, and the man rushes in to instantly point his gun at the boy. There is a woman with him who tells the man to take it easy on the kid. She tells Kevin not to be scared of them. He tells the duo his girlfriend is downstairs with her brother. The man repeats the word girlfriend with seeming interest. Suddenly, once the woman leaves, the man points his gun at Kevin again. Soon she finds Helen with Barney in the basement. The girl demands to know who they are, and the woman tells them she is Lucy. She wants them to know they are safe with her. Lucy also advises them to follow her. Helen looks at the GPS on the floor, deciding not to take it as she follows their new companion. She must sense something is not right with her. When they approach Kevin, Helen sees the man pointing a gun at him. If she distrusted Lucy, she now has proof she was right. The man, whose name is Pete, tells his friend they must take the kids to the congregation. Consequently, the group walks until they enter a place full of people. Father Albert is there, preaching that today they have done the work of God. We see 3 people there lying lifelessly. Albert continues by saying, what has been damaged will be restored. Then he says God has rewarded them, and draws everyone's attention to the kids Pete brought in with Lucy. It makes all the people turn around to look at the newcomers. Albert welcomes them prior to assuring them their worries are over. Guessing that they are hungry, the priest tells them to follow him. The next scene has the people entering a room where they sit at a table. They all get dishes of food brought to them. Albert wants to say grace while having everyone hold hands. After they do, he tells the kids they are alone in this world. Opposing him, Kevin says they haven't been alone. Helen adds they were with their teacher Horton, who was taking them to an island. Pete utters they heard of no such place with a confused expression. Wanting to avoid a commotion, Albert says they should finish their meal and talk about this later. Moving along, Pete privately tells the priest he thinks there is a lot the kids are not telling them. Pete is curious why they started the generator, but Albert says it doesn't matter. He claims to be a servant of God and wants to welcome the newcomers into their community. However, he wants someone to be sent to the basement. When Pete walks over to the kids, Barney asks what happened to his hand. He answers that he cut it off because he was bitten by a zombie. This means he was the policeman from the start of the film. Pete asks if they want to join him in securing the area. Only Kevin agrees to go. Lucy talks to Helen, telling the girl she was an anchorwoman before the crisis. She says that profession did not carry over to the apocalypse. Shifting to Kevin with Pete, the latter tells him the kids could stay at this place. It isn't that bad, he says. Once Kevin returns to his girlfriend, she says their only option is to get to the island. Kevin asks her if it really is. He seems to be considering what Pete told him in the hallway. Yet Helen firmly tells him she won't stay there. Afterward, Helen takes her brother to the washroom. In there, she feeds him raw meat. She has to do it away from everyone else, not wanting them to see he's a danger. Helen exits the room while Barney is in there. As she runs in the hallway, one of Albert's people spots her. Switching to Albert, he listens to the radio station Dan tuned into earlier, where an announcer says his place is the best chance to survive the crisis. Albert tells Pete they will leave in the morning. He also says the kids are coming with them whether they like it or not. Following this, Helen returns to the restroom, and the man who saw her run is there with Lucy. He orders Helen to stay back. Lucy points her shotgun at Barney, who is making zombie sounds again. When Albert enters with Pete, the former demands to know what is going on. Helen gets in front of Barney, telling them not to hurt him. Pete pushes her down. Then Kevin walks in and Pete holds him at gunpoint. In response, Helen points her gun at Lucy. Albert wants the girl to understand that her brother is infected, which means she should know what must be done. Helen says the boy is still human, and she can feed him raw meat. When the priest says that method works for a short time, Helen threatens to end herself. She tells him she knows he needs a woman capable of bearing to enter a place called the Valley. It is the reason why he wanted Helen to join them. She says they have to listen to her, or she will take her own. Thus, Helen commands them to let Kevin and Barney go. The next thing we see is all of them near an exit. Helen tells Barney he will have to go with Kevin, while she will stay here for a short time. Once the people she cares about leave, Albert takes her gun away before smacking her. Grabbing the poor girl by the hair, he tells her the rules for entering the valley are that they need a female capable of bearing. This means Helen doesn't need her other appendages, he threateningly adds. If she will bring difficulty to him, he will do the same to her. Later, Lucy sits in a room, guarding a restrained Helen. In the meantime, Dan meets Kevin and Barney outside. He proposes taking the young boy back to his house, while Kevin can do whatever he has to. Kevin tells him his girlfriend is being held inside. Shifting to her, she tells Lucy she needs to use the washroom, so the woman is forced to give her the keys. She makes Helen handcuff herself. As the duo is walking inside the hallway, Helen says they must have been waiting for someone like her to show up. She tells Lucy the latter is too old to be considered a woman capable of childbearing. This prompts Lucy to push the girl against a wall. She warns Helen that all of her buttons have been pushed long ago. After Helen has used the washroom, the duo returns to the place where Helen is supposed to sit restrained. Lucy gets the girl to restrain herself. When she's finished, she slides the keys back to her guard, but they fall from the table. As Lucy is picking them up, Helen pushes the metal table into her head, which makes her unconscious. Helen seems to have sneakily kept one of the keys while she restrained herself. She uses it to free herself and restrains Lucy. Then she collects the unlucky woman's shotgun. Exiting the room, Helen soon runs into Kevin in the hallway. Her boyfriend informs her that Barney is with Dan. They plan to venture into the basement to collect the GPS Helen left behind. Kevin asks her if it was such a bad thing for these people to take them to the valley. This causes Helen to point the shotgun at Kevin, firmly telling him she is not going there. Once they enter the basement, they are greeted by Albert and his people. The priest tells the kids they don't have a choice. They must go with them. He updates his statement by saying they need Helen, but but not her boyfriend. At this moment, Helen shares something very unsettling with Albert's group. She says the valley has a rule that for every female capable of giving birth, only 6 applicants will be allowed entry with her. Helen asks the people if Albert told them that merely 5 of them would make it. Her words create confusion among them. Consequently, Albert gets asked if what the girl says is true. He dodges the question by saying the valley is still a long distance from them. However, his followers aren't completely stupid, for they demand that he answer the question. While he talks to them, the kids start escaping and Helen presses a button that turns the lights off. Gunfire is heard in the darkness. When the couple gets out, we see Kevin has acquired an injury thanks to the gunfire. We also see several of Albert's people lying deceased, exactly how he wants them to enter the valley. Then we observe Albert holding the GPS, telling the survivors, Pete and Lucy, that he thinks he knows where the kids have gone. Switching to them, they arrive at Dan's house. Once he opens the front door, Helen gives him the bad news of Kevin being injured. Dan takes him inside, saying the boy got an exit wound. Suddenly, Helen points the shotgun at the man, demanding to know where her brother is. Dan says Barney is okay in the attic. Thus, Helen goes up there to see him restrained. Dan arrives, telling her that Barney is too far gone. She sees a zombie woman there too, prompting Helen to point the weapon at her. But Dan gets in front of Helen and tells her not to shoot. She responds by slamming his face with a shotgun. Dan is still able to tell her the woman is his wife. In the next scene, Dan tells Helen that Kevin should be fine. We see his wife hugging Barney, for they are both zombies. Helen learns his wife's name is Olivia. He gives her a plate of fresh meat and informs Helen that Olivia doesn't like being watched while she eats. He thinks the woman is ashamed of what she has become. Left alone, Helen watches Olivia being friendly with Barney. Soon she hears gunfire, making her alert. We see Pete break through the front door. Albert follows him with Lucy. The priest yells out to Helen, saying they know she is there. He advises the girl to come out. It will be easier that way. Everyone in the house is cautious until Helen starts firing. There are a lot of misses. No one ends up hitting anyone. As the firing stops, Pete climbs into the attic. He gets a surprise attack from Olivia because Helen released her. The girl sees him getting devoured and collects his revolver. Then the deceased man's friends enter the attic. Albert starts shooting at Olivia or Helen. It's uncertain who it is. Helen fires too, causing the invaders to flee. As they go, Lucy drops her axe. Dan witnesses the woman getting caught by the zombies outside. Now Albert is the only enemy left. Shortly after, Dan and Helen find him holding Kevin at gunpoint. Helen tells the corrupt priest that if he releases Kevin, she will go with him like he wants. He wants her to drop the gun first, so she does. Due to this, Albert allows the exchange to take place. Once they are alone, Olivia startles Albert, and he tries to shoot her. Helen uses this time to run into the man, making them bust through the door outside together. She is lucky to quickly run back inside, but Albert gets caught by zombies. The girl collects Lucy's axe before she hides in a room. There, she discovers she has a wound near her ankle. Of course, she frets over this misfortune. Thankfully, the area in which she was injured is not vital to her being alive, and she has the axe. Therefore, she impulsively decides to sever her leg with the tool. If the amputation wasn't enough, zombies enter the room, erasing any chances of her escaping. Yet Olivia is among them, hissing at the other zombies to leave. She is a decent zombie, having saved Helen. As she is about to leave the house, Dan allows her to approach him to bite his neck. Afterward, she leaves. An unknown amount of time later, Dan returns home and joins a legless Helen on the couch. He went to the hospital to get the poor girl a pair of crutches. She asks him how his wound is. The man replies he knows he's going to meet his demise. He wants Helen to take care of herself. Later, we see her place a solar panel up with Kevin. The couple got a radio to work and started broadcasting with it. Like the announcer on the radio earlier, Helen says they are survivors living in a safe location. If anyone wants to join them, she gives out their coordinates. As more time passes, some people eventually arrive, saying they heard Helen's broadcast. Helen sees one of them is infected, and one of the newcomers thought this place would have a cure for it. Unfortunately, Helen says no such cure exists here. At a different time, the survivors give the infected guy to the nearby zombies. But the zombies aren't hostile, for they are mostly people Helen knows. They accept the new member prior to walking away, leaving the survivors alone. Helen watches them go.